Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, back with another Market Watch episode. So we just had European Nationals this past weekend, and to be fair, we didn't really learn anything too crazy. A lot of it seemed the same as the NAWCQ in terms of like competitive meta wise, even down to I think Snake Eye Fiend Smith taking up exactly 49% of the top 64 cut. Now the unfortunate thing is that this sort of leaves us stuck in the middle, where I feel like a lot of people are just going to be sitting on their hands and waiting until the next ban list before we see any huge shifts in the market, since this format is essentially over. But of course, we're still going to talk about cards that players have been paying attention to as we head into next format, as I'm sure some things will manage to survive the August ban list and still be relevant next format. Let's get started. So kicking things off, let's take a look at Silu Hat Rabbit. Now this card is a generic link to Illusion Monster, and it has a pretty unique effect. It sets directly from your deck a trap card that can special summon itself as a monster. There's a couple of new cards that did come out in the Infinite Forbidden itself, but I think the main one that people have their eyes on is Angel Statue Azarun from back in Blazing Vortex, since it does work as a negate for a summon that does not start a chain. The downside is that if you do that, then this card can't be used as a link material for the turn. Kind of annoying, not the end of the world though. So going back over the last couple of weeks, Silu Hat Rabbit was actually something that came up in a lot of extra decks at the NAWCQ and then at European Nationals. There were a ton of players who were siding the one Azarun, but Aditya, who won the whole NAWCQ event, actually chose to run one Azarun in his main deck. With this card, it actually started off pretty cheap once the set dropped. Even early on, it was only like a $15 card or so, which is pretty cheap for pre-release, so naturally once the set settled down a bit, it was down to $7 to $8. However, this past week, we've seen the card surge right back up. It was as high as $15 a couple of days ago. It has since cooled off a little bit, back down to around the $12 to $13 mark. The Quarter Century has bounced back a little bit stronger. They were at around $50, but they've now stuck at around $70 though. To be fair, the QCR version of the card does look really amazing. Definitely something I'm going to be looking to pick up. Moving forward, although this card is generic, it's not something that you absolutely need to be playing in every single extra deck, so I'd probably expect it to stay pretty steady at around the $10 mark. Next up is kind of a funny one. We have Rygeki. Today we're specifically looking at the Ultimate Rare version from OTS Tournament Pack 2. Now I know we don't normally go over just high rarity cards like this, but we're making a bit of an exception here. This card is one of the oldest in Yu-Gi-Oh's history, simply destroying all monsters on your opponent's side of the field. Now maybe it's because I've been playing for so long, but it seems really strange to me that this card is at 3, and even stranger that it barely sees any play. However, this card is now actually trending because of the Tenpai Dragon deck. At European Nationals, Tenpai Dragons won the event, and they did so main decking 3 copies of Dark Hole and 3 copies of Rygeki, which is pretty insane. Now there are a ton of different high rarity versions of the card. Most notably, we have the Retro Pack Ultras and then the LOB Super First Eds. But the thing with those versions is that I feel like most of them belong to collectors rather than players. That said, the Ultimate Rare has disappeared from the market over the last few days. This was a $60 to $65 card, but right now, the cheapest near mint copy that you can get on TCG Player is $110, though there are just a couple of listings moving at or slightly above that mark. I don't know, this one feels like it's the result of people just pulling their listings. I don't think that many people would be buying into Ultimate Rare Rygekis. If you're playing Tenpai Dragons, a lot of players are on that deck because it's budget, right? So they'd just be playing the Secret Rare from the Tins or the Supers or something like that, rather than splurging and buying ultis. On top of that, this card has the alternate art Quarter Century printing coming up in the 2024 tins, which could look a lot better than the ultis, since the ultis never really looked that great anyways. That said, this is definitely something that I'd be looking to dump as soon as possible. Here's kind of a strange one. This is Visas Amritara. Now this card is a level 8 synchro that requires the non-tuner to be a light monster. It's treated as Visas Starfrost if it's on the field, and if it's synchro summoned, you can search for a spell or trap that mentions Visas Starfrost from your deck. Now this card was actually really important in Manadium, which were a really strong deck a couple of formats ago, though they have fallen off pretty hard with the banning of Borreload Savage Dragon and Baron de Fleur. Amritara had actually been an incredibly cheap secret rare, coming in at only $2 to $3 per copy. However, we've seen the card surge up in price over the last couple of weeks as the card is used by certain White Forest decks. Amritara can be used to search for Manadium Reframing, which negates a spell, trap, or monster effect as long as you control a synchro monster. meaning that you can link off the Amritara to further develop your board, and you just have access to this free counter trap card. The White Forest deck overall hasn't been anything too crazy yet. I think it's a relatively small percentage that actually did well at either of the national events, but I think that players are keeping their eyes on White Forest cards, and then all of the associated packages, because they could be really strong after the upcoming ban list. After all, Konami gave them 3 different secret rares in the Infinite Forbidden, which is just as many as Fiendsmith, so someone probably has to believe that they're going to be good. Amritara is, however, something that you should expect to see reprinted in the 2024 tins. So with this card, I'm sure you'll be fine if you keep 1 copy for yourself to play with, but other than that, this is something that you should be looking to offload before that reprint brings the price crashing down. Okay, so this is one that's been on people's radar for a little bit here. It's Constellar Ptolemy M7. Now this card is a generic rank 6 Xyz monster. Its effect is pretty simple. You detach a material from it to target a monster on the field or in either player's graveyard and return it to the hand. Now theoretically, this card could be a board breaker if you're going second, or if you're going first, you can make this card and return either a starter to your hand as follow-up or a hand trap that you can hopefully reuse. This card is of course made accessible thanks to the Fiendsmith engine as an alternative to cards like Beatrice and Wave High King Caesar. The only problem is that for most decks that are using the Fiendsmith engine right now, your extra deck space is incredibly tight, so most players don't really have room to be able to run this card. However, I think that most players are expecting Snake Eye to be hit pretty significantly on this upcoming list, and for Beatrice to be banned as well. So with the shakeup to the game, maybe there is a way for M7 to make its way into some extra decks. Fortunately, M7 has a ton of printings available. The Duelist Saga Ultra Rares look really good and they're still really affordable, but there's also the King's Court and Maximum Gold Eldorado rares that are just there for availability. However, the Dual Terminal Ultras and Secrets have been mostly bought up off the market, with the DTs at $30 to $35 and then the Secrets at $15 to $20, both with very low quantities available. With this card, you'll probably want to offload those higher rarity versions and just play with some of the cheaper ones, as the higher rarity versions will go down in price as players list their copies back onto the market. Alright, now I feel like this is a card that I've talked about a dozen times on Market Watch in the past. It's Centurion Primera. Primera is a very important card for the Centurion strategy. It's a tuner which the deck needs to be able to synchro summon, and on summon it searches for any Centurion card from your deck. Now before, Centurion was seeing some hype because the cards could be used in the White Forest strategy as a small engine that still granted the deck access to the King Calamity lock. The deck hasn't really performed thus far, but I think that, as we mentioned previously, there's still a lot of hope that the deck will be able to perform after the surrounding decks get hit on the upcoming ban list. The other thing to note is that we did get some additional Centurion support confirmed to be coming in Rage of the Abyss, and more support announced is always going to cause some players to look to pick up the existing cards for the theme. Now this card was pretty cheap just a month or two ago, hitting a low of around $15, but with all of the attention that White Forest and the new support has caused, it's shot up now and the Ultras are around $35 to $40. There's a couple of listings slightly lower than that, but they're all posted by unverified sellers with hardly any sales history, so we're going to ignore those listings on TCG Player for now. Now the one thing that we're not sure of is whether or not the Centurion cards will be reprinted in the 2024 tins. They were originally in Valiant Smashers, which came out at the end of 2023, but the Valiant Smashers set name isn't explicitly listed on the product for the 2024 tins, so we can't say for sure. It literally just depends on whether or not Konami feels like reprinting it. It's just going to be a big gamble here. You guys are going to have to balance out your risk of holding the card or picking it up now with it getting reprinted versus how much you actually want to play the deck now or in the future. Up next, another card I'm pretty sure we talked about a couple of times before. It's Magical Musket Cross Domination. Now this card is a very important one for the Magical Musketeer deck. This card lets you target a face-up monster on the field, negate its effects, and change its attack and defense to 0. As a quick play spell card, this is a really useful way to help Magical Musketeers break through boards, but it could also be a potential interruption to hold onto in your hand. Now, when the Fiendsmith archetype was first revealed, Magical Musketeers were among the first themes that players thought to mesh them with. They are also light fiend monsters, so there's naturally some synergy there, and theoretically you can use any of the Musketeer monsters to go into Fiendsmith's Requiem. I don't know exactly how good or viable this combination of strategies is, but there were a couple of high-profile players that were on Fiendsmith Musketeers at the NAWCQ, so even though they didn't top, there must be something there that led these players to being willing to bring it to such a big event. Now, aside from Caspar and Starfire, the other Magical Musketeer cards have not been reprinted. They all had just the one printing from Spirit Warriors, which came out back in 2017. Because of this, a lot of those other Magical Musketeer cards are actually pretty pricey, and Cross Dominations are at the top, coming in at $18 to $20 a piece. I feel like this is the sort of archetype where things will get reprinted in something like a Battles of Legends set, and it'll just include a whole bunch of different things for the theme to make it so much more accessible, similarly to how Infernoids got a ton of cards for their archetype reprinted in Battles of Legend Terminal Revenge. But until we actually get that confirmed, Magical Musketeers are going to be a pretty pricey deck to put together. And finally, the last card I'm mentioning in today's video is Neptune the Atlantean Prince. Now, this is a really cool card for the Mermail Atlantean strategy, which is getting support in Rage of the Abyss. This card can actually serve two different functions. If it's summoned, you send an Atlantean from your deck to the graveyard to search for an Atlantean. This is cool because it lets you send Dragoons from your deck as a cost, so this card can basically get you a double search. However, if you use this card as cost for a Water Monsters effect, you can special summon an Atlantean monster from your graveyard, which is pretty cool value as well. So for a long time, this card was basically a bulk ultra rare. When I think Mermails, I actually don't think about Neptune all that much. I think of Teus and Megalo, Dragoons, Marksman, all from when Mermail first popped up on the scene and really took over the game. However, Neptune was a really crazy boost for the deck. I just think it came out a little bit too late for the deck to really be anything too crazy and really abuse the card. However, it looks like Neptune will have a chance to shine once again. I believe that lists that I've seen running around online with the new support run 2 to 3 copies of this card. This card has just 2 printings, both as Ultras from Breakers of Shadows and then the Tins. Either version is going to cost you around $7 to $8 right now. I would assume that this card will get a reprint closer to when the set drops, but I feel like we could say the same thing about a ton of different key cards for the deck, and it's really unlikely that every single one is going to get reprinted. It's going to be up to you guys and how dead set you are on playing this deck, but at the very least, I definitely look at offloading any extra copies of some Mermail or Atlantean cards that you may be sitting on. Alright guys, that is all we have for today's episode. Definitely going to be a little bit slower over the next few weeks as we wait for that ban list to drop, which I guess should be in 3 to 4 weeks because it said mid to late August. I don't exactly know what that means because it could fall after YCS Sacramento. Hopefully it's before that so we do get to see the new list in effect for that event as well, which would be really interesting because it would give us a really early taste of what the new format is going to look like. Anyways guys, if you did enjoy today's Market Watch, please make sure you let me know by hitting that thumbs up button. Make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. And until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.